Good afternoon or good morning, wherever you are in the world today. It's my pleasure to introduce our second DMU for Life webinar, and I'm delighted to introduce our DMU alumnus, Prasant Sudhakaran. Prasant is an entrepreneur and an investor, and he's co-founded several startups in the US and served as a venture partner in a New York-based fund. Prasant's specialism is in products that make use of artificial intelligence, machine learning, and blockchain-based technologies. In 2005, Prasant completed his undergraduate course in business studies at DMU and has subsequently achieved a master's degree from New York University. Prasant is speaking to us today from India, and he'll share his thoughts around developing your inner entrepreneur, a webinar which will draw on his extensive experience in the sector, and he will address many topics. And I'm going to leave Prasant now to tell you all about this, and I'm looking forward to a fascinating talk. Over to you, Prasant.
Thank you, Russ. So, hi everyone, really excited to speak to you today on this topic. Because of the format, I think I'll just run through my presentation, and once I'm done, I'm happy to field some questions because I can't see them right now. So yeah, let's get on, moving on. So the first question is why? Because, why would you want to be an entrepreneur? And the easy answer to that is that we kind of live in an era where the cost of taking a risk is really reduced. So if you think about this from purely comparative, in a comparative way, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, the risks involved were significantly higher. So, and again, I'm not saying they don't exist. It's just that the risks have been significantly reduced. They still exist, and there are ways to mitigate those and, work on your ideas and whatnot. So, for example, you can lease service by the hour. 20 years ago, or even 15 or so years ago, this is very hard to do that. If you think about Amazon, it's this giant right now, but then when they started, they literally had to buy their own servers, host their own servers. You don't have to do any of that. You can lease servers by the hour, by the minute even. So those risks are exponentially lower. You can also run hundreds of experiments, for super cheap. You can run them for literally a couple of dollars, and you could have validation on which of your ideas are the most viable. It's all possible to do this now, which again, many years, just a couple of decades ago, it was impossible because or nearly impossible because you literally had to get this done physically, and it's all electronic now, so you don't have to worry about those things. You can also anonymously get feedback, and you can start getting sign up for your idea even before you have a product. So, and I'm sure some of you have come across these really interesting ideas, or even let's say something on Kickstarter or Indiegogo and whatnot, which are really promising technologies, or at least conceptually they're really promising, and you can validate those things even before it gets to production. And this is true for technological products and non-tech products, because ultimately your channel is through technology these days. That's the most efficient way to market your product and distribute your product. So in effect, the real question becomes, what is the cost of you not taking a risk of being an entrepreneur? Now, another way to flip this is to say that as an employee, your earnings will be capped. So, and I see this from my own personal examples. Like when I was a management consultant, I could work wonders for, if I did, I could work wonders for the client I was working on, but the most I got was a small bonus and a pat on the back. On the other hand, as an entrepreneur, I potentially have an uncapped income. My uh, so my effort and my output are not necessarily correlated in the sense that it can be really nonlinear. In in a traditional job, your efforts and your, you have a cap, and plus your efforts and your outcome are very kind of correlated. It's linear. You put in more effort, you get more outcomes, but then you hit the ceiling. That does not seem to apply for entrepreneurs or even investors. So in effect, what you have is an opportunity to make these non-linear outsized returns with seemingly low risk bets. Again, I'll be very careful about these things. I'm not saying there is no risk, but you can play the game right so that your risk is lower. And risk elimination never goes away. You can't eliminate all risk. There is always some risk. But the smart thing to do is make sure you do it in such a way that you can reset. So you're not really you're not playing Russian roulette. You've got another opportunity at the game. And yeah, I mean, like I said, you have to actively de-risk yourself. So don't bet your rent money on something you're not sure about. Um, this is something I see very often because people really romanticize the notion of being an entrepreneur, and it's not really that romantic. I mean, it can be, but not if you don't know what you're doing, and especially if you don't have the expertise. So, expertise or the financial cushion. Very often, I see entrepreneurs, right, and maybe I myself was in that boat when I first started out. I just rushed into it because I was so passionate about an idea, and I did not really understand what it took to turn that idea into a product, and then the product into a cash flow generating machine that people really wanted. So you have to be really kind of cognizant about these pitfalls. So build your expertise, you know, build your financial cushion, and again, I know I've been talking about some of the negatives about having a job, but then it's not all negative. It can really allow you to build that financial cushion before you take a leap. It can help you build your connections. It can really help you build your you know resume and expertise. So so I'm not saying it's all bad there, but the next question really often very often tends to be like, how exactly do you find your idea? So, and some really bad advice that I've received, and I've seen this over and over again, is that find something that you're passionate about, which is well and good. But like, if I'm passionate about, let's say, football, or something that no one really cares about. Like, if I'm passionate about football, but there's no real way for me to monetize that passion, it's a pointless thing. A really interesting framework that I've come across is this thing called ikigai. Um, I'll share this presentation later on, so you can go look this up further. But it's basically the coming together of what you're good at, what you can be paid for, what you really love doing, and what the world needs. And at the intersection of all that is, when you can find that. Again, I'm not saying you will be able to, or even I'm not even saying that the most successful products are a result of this, but ideally you should have at least three or four of these dimensions. But beyond that, it's about where exactly is your edge. Like, if you and I were competing on something, why would people rush to you and not me, and vice versa? What exactly is your competitive advantage? Think about it as this: like, what is one thing that you really know so well that all your friends will bet on you, or what is that one thing that you know more than any of your peers or your friends? That's a good way to start. But that's not enough. You also need this to have a large market. So, how large is that market? And that will dictate how many dollars you can get from as a percentage of the market, as it will also dictate how often investors will be willing to fund that, because investors like to like to target large markets. Also, is this something you'll be excited to work on for the next 5 to 8 years? So very often I see like entrepreneurs who are, you know, who are really excited about something that's really hot topic right now, but it may or may not be. I mean, forget 5 years, maybe 6 months later, it may not be, something that anyone's interested in. So very often we chase these hot topics, but they may or may not be something that you personally might be excited to work on over the next 5 to 8 years. Uh, a good way to think about this is that, like, what problem keeps you up at night? Like, is there something that's really like, it's a tough problem. You have some insights on that, and you don't think anyone else is really focused on that at the moment, and you have some information edge, some kind of advantage there that you can really like work on. And you know I mean, essentially you can apply a combination of your knowledge, and then there is this randomness that allows you to come up with something amazing. So so there is this thing called the Rumsfeld matrix. I'll come to that pretty soon. But essentially, this is that it just the gist of it is that humans are really bad judges of like what's unknown and non-events. So uh, this is Donald Rumsfeld. He was a senior official in the Bush administration. You can look up this quote by Rumsfeld. Like back then when he made it, a lot of people made fun of him because it sounded like gibberish. But if you really unpack it, it's really profound. And I don't know if he really knew what he was saying, but like the after effect is really profound. So you've got two axes here: the knowns, what's known and what's unknown. So basically, the known is your assumption. The known unknown are your gaps in your information. The unknown knowns, those are like tacit knowledge. I mean, that's tacit knowledge. For example, you can't learn fishing from a book, or you can't learn fishing from, uh, or you can't learn, how to ride a bicycle from reading a book, and so on. And the unknown unknowns, that's where the magic happens. Those are your discoveries and disruptions. And I'm sure you've heard this word thrown around a lot, disruption. So most people in the startup world, they're trying to disrupt something. So as an example, the next bank or the next solution in banking will not come from bankers. It'll come from someone outside this industry who's actually going to disrupt it. The next solution in pretty much anything, right from agriculture to computing, will not come from someone within the industry. It'll come from someone outside who's got this rare insight plus some background knowledge who can and to when you combine all that, you're onto some kind of magic. And but to do that, you need it's ideal to have a partner, your co-founder or co-founders. I had co-founders, like multiple. So we were all similar in some ways, but we also brought uh, different skills to the table, and that's what you want in a co-founder. So Noel Ravikant, who's an investor, and he has some really interesting things to say about startups and life in general. So one of the things he said is that, can you see yourself working with this person for the next 10 to 15 years? Or maybe I think he said even 50 to 75 years. But yeah, I mean, 10 to 15 is a good way to think about it. And you can maybe even narrow it down to like 5 to 8 years, because if your startup works well, that's what you're looking at. Like my startup, when it, between forming it to, getting funded and taking off, it kind of took about 5 to 6 years. So, it's a long process. It's not like a flash in the pan. You've got to be, you will be stuck with this person for the next 5 to 8 years or more, if you're lucky. And essentially, does this person complement your skills? Do they share your values, but they still, I mean, people can share your values and still push back on, on things that they believe in. So it's like, will they challenge you when you're wrong, or when they feel you're wrong, and will you do the same to this person? Or because um, it's terrible when you can't do that, when you're so caught up with being nice to each other. And you know there are ways to disagree without being superficially nice and all that. So you should be able to do this. So do you think you can work with this person? Do you think you can push back and disagree with this person respectfully? And I mean, this quote really, like, this is it really resonates with me. Like, this is again from Naval Ravikant. He said, like, you want to play long-term games with long-term people, and is this co-founder of yours a long-term person? Now, I know there are people who've had great success without a co-founder, with just, like, as a solo founder. And I don't know how they do that. It's, I would say it's not the norm. It's, I really envy them that they were able to pull that off. I know I cannot. I'm not as bright a talent to pull that off without a co-founder to support me. And I'm glad I had really smart people to work with, really people with interesting insights, interesting ways to look at the world. Um, I really have to attribute any success I've had to these amazing people I've worked with. So in terms of the entrepreneurial life itself, um, it does get depicted as something very glamorous, but I can assure you it's not. It's essentially a quest to find your tribe. Now, what I mean by that is, like, when you have this idea for a startup, it's essentially a really contrarian way to look at the world. You think something is wrong with the way things are happening right now, and you have this amazing new way to do things, or you have this way to fix a problem that no one else thinks is a problem right now. And essentially, what you're doing is you are embarking on a quest to find others who believe in your ideal version of the world. Now, this ideal version could be really restrictive. It doesn't have to be changing the entire world, but it could be just about changing something to do with, let's say, how banks charge you excess fees, or how airlines charge you excess baggage. I mean, it could be something that you're really upset about, something you think is unfair or inefficient, and you can change it. And surprisingly, no one else really thought it was a problem till you had this idea. And yeah, I mean, essentially, you're finding a tribe. So your first set of believers, I mean, it's like you've let them in on a shared secret that the rest of the world hasn't really understood yet. Excuse me. And these will be your strongest advocates, your strongest supporters. Um, you know, they they will be in a position to literally push you on to the next level, on your journey, or of your entrepreneurial journey. That being said, it can be really mentally taxing because it's tough. It's just basically the two or three of you, against the world, because no one truly believes that what you're working on is important. So to kind of hear that every single day, and have your logic, have your knowledge, have your sanity kind of question every single day, if you're not mentally strong, that can really take a toll. Um, Also, I mean, I'm sure you come across this statistic. It's thrown about very often that over 90% of startups don't make it to year one. And even so, if you make it to year one, again, maybe another 80 or 90% don't make it to year two, and so on and so forth. So it's a brutal world out there because um, your ideas are fantastic, but maybe there are many similar ideas, and it's in a way you're fighting it out, with the rest of the world, and existing ideas and new ideas and whatnot. So it's brutal. It's literally survival of the fittest. Also, like I said, you will meet people who reject your idea nearly every single day. And some of these could be arguably, I mean, not very bright people, but then what hurts is when some really bright people will tell you that your idea absolutely sucks. There's no way it's ever going to amount to something. Um, but if that happens to you, you're not alone. As an example, some incredibly smart people have passed on Airbnb. I mean, not just Airbnb, every single mega success story that you can think of, like Facebook and Google, Pinterest. Just Google, just search for this online. You'll find a list of investors who passed on a certain very successful company. So this is, I don't know if this is an email. Well, I don't know who this email was sent from, but it was sent to Brian Chesky from Airbnb. And basically it just says, oh, we're really sorry, but I don't think this opportunity is big enough. And they IPO'd this year, and it was an amazing IPO, success story for all investors involved. And but imagine, like, maybe just about 12 years ago, everyone thought they were crazy, that um, no one would really rent their apartments to strangers. And you know these days it's very common. I would say in the recent past, I've taken Airbnbs more than hotels. I find it a lot more convenient for me. But here's the dilemma. Sometimes it's genuinely hard to determine if you're onto something truly like radically new and amazing, or if you're just deluded. It's a very thin line, and I don't think even the people involved can tell where that line is. And I mean, Airbnb and Uber are perfect examples. Like Uber, when it started, it was like, anyone could start, sharing their car, and people were like, why would anyone do that? And of course, over time it's changed, but the model has changed. But when they started, it was kind of like that. Uh, Facebook had a similar way, I mean, story, and which I'm sure we've all come across in books and movies and whatnot. So yeah, I mean, where is the line between delusion and novelty? It's very hard to tell. But I mean, we do have some tricks to find out whether we're onto something, because at the end of the day, the only opinion that matters is that of the end user, your customer or your end user. Because investors can tell you you're crazy, but then, if you show them your growth charts that customers are really using this, no investor is going to argue with that. So there is this concept called the product market fit, and ultimately every startup is just looking for that product market fit. And if you Google this, you'll find like a lot of really interesting um, ways to define this. But my definition is simple. If you take away your product from your customers tomorrow, will they call you in a really angry way and demand that you restore access to them? And I did not come up with this. I think it's Andy Rashcliffe from yeah, I mean, I think it's Andy Rashcliffe from Silicon Valley who came up with this, but I it truly resonates with me. Like, that's one way to know whether you're deluded or if you're onto something big. If your customers don't protest when you take away access, uh, maybe it is not the product that that you should be working on. But why not to be an entrepreneur? That's equally, I would say, important. So last year, yeah, or in fact the year before, 2020 is like a weird year now. It's like, yeah, this happened in 2019. I was invited to speak to a bunch of high school kids at NYU because they were visiting NYU. And so one of the questions just chit chatting, I asked them like, oh, why do you want to be an entrepreneur? And this the student just said, oh, because I want to be my own boss. And that's a great thing. Yeah, sure, you have to be your own boss. That's great, because some people realize early on that they may not make good employees, which is great. Self knowledge is great, but you also want to be aware that it's not just being the boss. You also have to be your own janitor and your own, like, salesperson, and your own product guy and whatnot. You have to wear multiple hats. It's never just being your own boss, because um, there is this often thrown around topic, which I don't completely agree with, but sometimes very apt. It's like influence without authority. So if you have to keep telling people that you're the boss, maybe that's not the way to go about it, and maybe you're in it for the wrong reasons. So if you don't have like some really unique insight into a problem, I would say don't start a company. I mean, learn the ropes, get a job, like build some skills, make sure you have the right kind of social capital, financial capital, and knowledge capital. It's something you need to work on. And I made the mistake where I just jumped into forming a company because I was just passionate about something, and turns out no one really wanted it. And um, so yeah, I mean, you can learn from other people's mistakes. um, Another heuristic to evaluate your ideas, like it's often thrown about that if your idea is not 10x better or 10x cheaper, don't build it. And I mean, 10x could be maybe a little too much sometimes, but then i I agree with the general sentiment of it. Like, if it's not orders of magnitude cheaper and better, don't start it. Because if it's just marginally better, I mean, people have inertia. They don't want to jump into something new just because it's like you claim it's like 2% better or something. I'm sure you've heard of this maxim that no one gets fired for hiring IBM, and it's just a way to say that people have inertia. So if you know, I mean, IBM is obviously a known quantity, and no one like hiring IBM over your solution will get fired because they can just say, "Hey, that is a safe choice," right? And your choice was a risky one, unless if you can demonstrate that you were 10 times better than IBM, or replace IBM with the company that you're targeting. 10 times better or 10 times cheaper, but there has to be something exponentially better about it. And startups can be a really fun way to accelerate your learning and your earnings. But I mean, the reason being that you're doing multiple things. So and this might be true even if you join a small company, because I've seen this with friends of mine who were early employees at a startup, and they didn't necessarily start the company, but they were like employee number 3 or employee number 7 and so on. They saw the company grow. They had to do multiple things, because if you were to join, let's say, the market leader in that industry, you would have maybe a very narrowly defined uh, task to do, and you would just be doing that. You would not be venturing outside your area of expertise, or area assigned to you. But in startups, you're basically doing everything. So like I said earlier, you have to be the janitor, you have to be the product person, the marketing guy. And of course, I mean, this is not to say that you don't have experts there. You could have an expert in marketing, an expert in sales, an expert in whatnot uh, on your team, but you end up doing multiple things. So you learn so much more, and it helps you. And the aim here is to do it in such a way that you can fail multiple times and still have a shot at mega success. You just need to be right one time. You can fail multiple times, provided it does not kill you. So again, think of it like you're not playing Russian roulette. You're trying to play blackjack. So be be very cognizant of the kind of risk you're taking. There's a very famous investor called Manish Pabrai. He talks about how he went about doing this. Well, he started his company while he still had a job, and he was working on his side gig overnight, and because he was so passionate about it, he even though he was doing his regular 9 to 5. When he came back, he was excited about working on something new, and he kept at it till he got to a point where his income from the side gig exceeded his income from his regular job. That's when he knew it was time to leave. Again, that's not the only way. There are multiple ways to do it. Like I said, these days the risks, have been significantly reduced. There are accelerators that you can apply to, for example, that will invest in you right from day one, and you have like at least like a living wage and some kind of income to provide you basic necessities while you're working on your big ideas and so on. So yeah, it's possible to do all these things. Don't bet the house on on your one idea. Just play it safe, and hopefully that leads to something really interesting. So that is my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
Thank you very much for that, Prasant. Very insightful and very interesting. And I'm going to go out and make $1 million tonight. Well, maybe not. I've got a number of questions here for you. Excuse me, I'm looking down because I've written them down. How has the pandemic and its impact on moving more and more online affected startups, in your opinion?
So, well, personally, for me, the pandemic initially it was really tricky for us at my startup, and then later on it kind of stabilized. So, and I would say it's true for most businesses, but I think there has been a mental shift of sorts, because in some ways we've had these technologies 5 or 10 years ago. So even 10 years ago, we had like when I was in a consulting firm, we had these. I forgot the actual name of the product, but it was something by Cisco, which enabled like online meetings and video calls and all that. So we've had these technologies for a while now, but it's just a mental shift where now people think, oh, we don't really need to meet in person. We could just do this on a call, or we have video conference and whatnot. So that shift has definitely happened. Also, like prior to the pandemic, I would say people, well, especially investors, investing in startups is a very high touch business, because it's not like getting a loan from the bank, because you may be anonymous when getting a loan from the bank, but if you're getting any kind of like early stage investor to come in on board with your company, it's very high touch. They need to know you. They need to understand how you think. They need to have some background into your everything from your educational history to your work history. They need to know you are the right person to build this company and whatnot. So I would say prior to the pandemic, it was you had to like meet them multiple times, and and so on. But now again, I've heard of people getting funded without ever meeting their investor, just based on Zoom calls and whatnot. So I think that mental shift has happened where people are really okay to do this without really meeting in person. That's one aspect of it. And also, I think it's really accelerated digital adoption. I mean, again, it's not something new. It's happened. It's been happening for the past many years, but we were forced to like increase our adoption, just over the past say 8 to 10 months. So that's also happened. So the world's going to get increasingly like digital, decentralized, and maybe also like the end result is also that maybe you don't need to live in London, or you don't need to live in New York or San Francisco and whatnot. Like, I mean, I've heard this mentioned multiple times that talent is uh, distributed geographically, but opportunity is not. And
Yeah,
she used to be
yeah.
true. She used to be very, very, very true. But then maybe because now we're fine tuned to say, okay, we can make this investment online, and we don't need to meet the person and whatnot.
Mhm.
It's maybe that shift has happened, and entrepreneurs might find it easier.
Okay. Thanks very much for that answer. Very comprehensive. You you talked about the importance, what my word, not yours, the importance of fit with a potential co-founder, complementary skills, the ability to get along, and so on. I just wondered, have you ever got that wrong, and what were the consequences?
Oh yeah, I got it drastically wrong. Uh, like one thing is you need to be able to trust the person, right? Because uh, for better or worse, you will be spending a huge proportion of your time over the next 8 to 10 years if it takes off with this person or persons. And if you don't trust them enough, or if they don't have the right kind of values, it can really backfire. And I've been in a situation where, in hindsight, I should have seen that coming. But then this co-founder of mine did not really have the right kind of values. And I mean, if you can lie to a vendor, or if you can lie to an investor, ultimately that person will lie to you as well. And those kind of things. And again, these are not lies without consequences. They can have major financial consequences.
Yeah.
So yeah, so you need to be able to, you know, do you trust this person? Um, I mean, I would say that comes in, that's paramount. That comes in before even the skill sets, because you could, and I mean, I think Charlie Munger, or what was it, Warren Buffett, who said that if your partner had to be, you know, I mean, yeah, I mean, you'd rather, if your partner was dishonest, you'd rather he was, I mean, yeah, it's better to have like a dishonest person who with no skills than like someone supremely talented but also dishonest. So because
Yes.
that can be a killer combination. So yeah, I mean, of course, you need to be able to trust them. Plus, you need to be able to know that when push comes to shove, they have the skill sets to deal with that, and they have the social capital. They maybe have bring in some financial capital as well. Um,
Hmm.
One thing I've seen, I mean, not with me, but I've seen this happen to a friend's startup where 3 or 4 people got together, all amazing people, but then one of the founders, like 3 months into the startup, realized he's going to have a baby, and he could no longer take the risk he thought he could. So that changed the whole dynamic of it. Again, I mean, these things happen. And so, but yeah, I mean, even that, those are the kind of things that you need to be able to keep in mind, that dynamics can change, life situations can change. So it's a moving object in a way.
Hmm. Okay. Prasant, do you have a personal definition of success?
Um, well, yeah. I mean, yes and no, in the sense that for me, um, when I started out, let's say, early on in my career, I had a certain financial goal. Like, I needed to hit a certain number. Um, so that's the numerical aspect of it. But then, um, you don't want to narrowly define success. You don't want to be just like, I want to hit X $100,000 or X $1 million. I mean, that's a super narrow definition. For me, it's also a numerical level plus, like, am I better now, like in terms of my acquired knowledge and my experience now as compared to 5 years ago? Um, am I, right now, if I were to email a few investors, would they be at least willing to like speak to me compared to 5 years ago? Uh, would I be able to like get like a really interesting co-founder based on my connections and whatnot? So So my definitions have expanded. It's not, I mean, of course, when you start off, because your personal goals, your like whatever society and whatnot, you kind of define yourself in narrow financial terms. And I'm not saying that's wrong. You need those. It's a very different um, mindset when you hit your financial goals and you're able to uh, be a little mentally free. So that's amazing. But then beyond that, in terms of your knowledge and in terms of your ability, your connections, I mean, would people even want to work with you? Like, if
Yeah.
it doesn't matter how much money you have, but then if people don't want to work with you, what good is that, right? So it's those kind of non-tangibles that I have, but I don't think I have a formal definition as such.
Mm-hmm. So what I picked up from that is it's about, okay, clearly about the financial success, but also about reputational success. So the reputation of yourself with potential investors, but also potential employees and partners, etc. Yes.
Absolutely. So again, one way to think about it is that you have your financial capital, but then that's not the only capital you want to grow. You want to also keep compounding upon your social capital, your
Mm-hmm.
knowledge capital, and your reputational capital. So, I mean, there are multiple forms of capital in my view.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Thank you. Great answers. So, final question. As the world navigates towards a new normal, do you think that entrepreneurs will become more important in that new normal?
I would say they've always been extremely important because entrepreneurs are like I mentioned earlier, the contrarian ones. You know, they see a problem where no one else has seen a problem, and people think they're crazy because maybe they are in some ways. And you have to have that bit of madness there to say that I don't like the way the world works, or this subset of the world, or this subset of the universe, the way it functions right now. I hate it. I'm going to change it. And people will question your sanity and everything. But if you get it right, it can be really rewarding, and not just financially, but also the fact that you were the first one to see a problem where no one else even imagined it to be a problem. And yeah, so in the new normal, whatever that is, because I see all kinds of doomsday scenarios sometimes, and I also see the opposite. We'll just have to figure out as we go. No one
Mm-hmm.
really knows for sure, but yeah, I mean, if it's kind of somewhat like a dystopian future where I was reading, there can't be more than X number of people, like 5 or 10 people at family gatherings, or is it something of that nature, or if it's something where you know I see other people saying that no, because of these vac- vaccinations and advances in modern science and whatnot, like pandemics will be a distant memory, in the very near future and whatnot. So yeah, the truth is somewhere in the middle, and regardless of what the future beholds, like entrepreneurs will always be important because every single convenience that we have is because some entrepreneur did not like the status quo, or was too lazy to go along with the status quo, wanted something very convenient and whatnot. So entrepreneurs will always be important.
Okay. Well, Prasant, I think I can say for myself, or certainly for myself and for the audience, thank you very much for sharing with us your inner entrepreneur. Very insightful. Thank you very much. And I think we can bring things to a close now.
Thanks, Russ. Hopefully that was insightful, and I'm glad to have had this opportunity to speak to fellow alumni.